Mara Whitcomb woke with frost on the inside of the windshield and her right hand closed around a plastic nursery rewards card she had been using as an ice scraper. For a moment, she did not move. The laundromat behind her had gone dark at midnight, and the last dryer had stopped its soft metal tumbling hours ago. Now, the only sound was the wind pushing a grocery bag along the curb and the tired tick of her Subaru cooling under a thin skin of March cold. She had slept sitting up again, boots wedged under the petal's green scarf pulled over her mouth so her own breath would not cloud the glass too badly. The card bent in her fingers as she scraped a clear patch no wider than her palm. Outside the back wall of the laundromat showed a painted sun with yellow rays, a cheerful thing made cruel by the hour. Mara looked at it until the lure in her eyes settled. Then she reached into the cup holder and counted what was left. 3 20s, 4 10s, 6 1s. A handful of quarters she kept for laundry and gas station coffee. $142 if she did not eat hot food. Her phone woke against her thigh. She knew the number before the screen lit fully, and still her stomach tightened. Tyler had left 4 messages since midnight. Her older brother never called unless he wanted the shape of her silence to prove something. She played the newest one because not playing it had begun to feel like another kind of fear. "You need to stop hiding," Mara Tyler said. There was traffic behind him, or maybe the roar of the packing shed fans from the nursery they no longer owned. "People are asking me where the money went. I told them I trusted you with the accounts. I told them you were the one who signed the supplier extension." Mara closed her eyes. The paper had been on the hood of his truck in a rainstorm. He had said it was routine that if they did not move fast, the wholesale pansies would be canceled and spring would be gone before they had anything to sell. She had signed beside the place he tapped with his finger. Her handwriting had looked small and obedient under the wet sky. On the message, Tyler sighed like a man carrying a burden alone. "If you have any sense left, you'll call the bank and explain what you did." The recording ended. Mara did not cry. Tears made the scarf, damp cloth, turned cold. She deleted the message, then opened the search page she had promised herself not to open. The nursery name appeared before she finished typing. Whitcomb Family Growers. Failed loan. Unpaid vendors. A social media post from Tyler, written in polished sorrow, said he was doing everything possible to make things right after internal mismanagement. Internal mismanagement meant Mara. It meant the girl who had watered flats before school, who knew which plugs could survive a cold night, and which ones needed to be pulled under cover, who could tell by the sour smell of a tray when the roots had drowned. It did not mean the brother who had borrowed against the land twice and smiled through both signatures. Before we continue, if stories like this mean something to you, hit subscribe. And tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. At 8:17 while Mara was using the laundromat restroom to wash her face with pink hand soap an unknown Salina number called. She almost let it pass. Unknown numbers had become collectors, creditors, people who said her name as if it were a stain. But the woman on the voicemail did not sound like a collector. "My name is Claire Voss. I'm an attorney handling a small estate matter for the late Charlotte Whitcomb of Briar Falls. If this is Mara Elise Whitcomb, I need to speak with you about a property transfer." Mara played it twice. Then she stood under the humming restroom light and called back with wet hair dripping from her chin. Claire Voss did not waste words. Her voice had the dry kindness of someone who had learned that softness could make bad news heavier. "Charlotte Whitcomb was your great-aunt. Lottie, according to her papers. I met her maybe 3 times, Mara said. That matches what she wrote." Mara gripped the edge of the sink. The porcelain was chipped in a crescent near her thumb. "If this is about money, there isn't any." "It is not money in the usual sense," Claire said. "There is a parcel outside Briar Falls. A greenhouse, a potting shed, and an old seed library annex. Your great-aunt held the title privately after the county lease expired." Mara let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "A greenhouse. Yes, I just lost a nursery. I saw some of that in the file." Claire paused. "I'm sorry." No one who knew Mara had said that without attaching blame. The words arrived plain, and because they asked nothing from her, she had to look away. Claire continued, "The transfer value is $1. But there are delinquent utility liens and the county has posted a safety notice. I won't dress it up. It may be more obligation than inheritance. Then why call me? Because Charlotte named you, specifically. She left instructions that you were to receive the key before any sale or demolition discussion. Marat pictured a building full of cracked trays, old fertilizer salts blooming white on concrete mice in the potting soil panes broken by hail. She should have said no before Hope found a corner to stand in. What was it called? She asked. Whitcomb Seed Annex. Some records call it the county greenhouse, though it was never fully county-owned. There was a seed exchange attached to it years ago. A seed exchange. Her mother had once kept bean seeds in baby food jars above the stove. Mara remembered the soft rattle when Elise Whitcomb shook them into her palm, counting as if each one were a coin from a country they might someday reach. Claire gave directions. Briar Falls was not much more than a name on county maps, a scattering of old houses and grain bins north of the highway outside Salina. Mara wrote the address on the back of a gas receipt. When the pen skipped, she pressed harder until the paper nearly tore. By noon, she had put $8 of gas in the Subaru and spent $1 on coffee so hot it hurt her tongue. The March sky over central Kansas looked scraped clean, pale blue at the edges and hard white near the sun. Winter grass lay flat along the ditches. Fence lines flickered past with plastic caught in the barbs. Every few miles, a field showed last year's sorghum stalks broken off like rows of dull pencils. The key arrived by courier at Claire's office, taped inside an old seed catalog because Lottie had written that no envelope should be trusted with it. Claire handed the catalog across her desk. It was from 1998. Its cover faded to a soft green with a tomato sliced open to show perfect chambers of seed. She marked a page, Claire said. Mara opened to the fold. Someone had circled a variety called Prairie Dawn and written in blue ink, "Not everything gone is finished." Claire looked at the sentence but did not comment. The county placard says no occupancy. If you enter document conditions and don't disturb anything structural, I can give you 48 hours before the next inspection notice goes out. 48 hours to do what? To decide whether you want to fight for it. Mara almost smiled at the word fight. She had no fight left that anyone could see. She had a car with a cracked taillight, a duffel bag of clothes and dirt still worked into the lines of her hands from a nursery that no longer wanted her name. But she took the catalog. The key, a small brass one darkened by years, had been taped over a picture of lettuce seedlings. The road to the greenhouse ran past a closed feed store, a church with a wind-bent sign, and a drainage ditch where snowmelt had gathered in brown seams. Briar Falls appeared gradually: 3 streets, a volunteer fire station, a post office with peeling white paint, and beyond it a county road that narrowed between bare cottonwoods. At the end stood a chain-link gate pulled sideways on one hinge. A metal sign hung from it, orange and official. Unsafe structure. Entry prohibited without authorization. Behind the fence, the greenhouse waited. It was longer than Mara expected, a low glass spine stretched east to west, its steel ribs showing through broken panels. The south side had taken the worst of the weather. Whole panes were gone. Others held cracks like frozen lightning. The roof sagged slightly near the middle where a rusted vent had stuck half open and let seasons pour through. Bindweed threaded the gravel aisle beyond the door. A strip of shade cloth had collapsed over a bench and stiffened there, black with dust. The potting house at the west end leaned but had not fallen. Its little window was boarded from the inside. North of the glass house, tucked back like an afterthought, stood a narrow annex with beadboard walls and a limestone foundation. On its door, under gray flakes of paint, Mara could still make out hand-lettered words. Seeds returned here. She stayed by the gate a long time. The phrase should have meant nothing to her. It was a practical instruction, the kind of sign old women made when they were tired of explaining a system that had worked for years. But the word returned caught in her chest. Returned, not sold. Returned, not owned. Returned as if even the smallest dry seed had a road back. Mara unlocked the chain. The brass key resisted, then turned with a dull click that sounded too final in the open air. Wind moved through the broken panes and the glass house answered in tiny, uneven notes. Not music exactly, but not silence either. She stepped inside only as far as the threshold. Safety first, a voice in her mind said, practical and stern. Her own voice from all the years she had carried flats across wet concrete and told seasonal workers where not to put their weight. Broken glass covered the first 10 feet of gravel. The south door hung crooked. A roof panel ticked against metal with each gust. Near the central aisle, an old wooden bench had split down the middle, its cypress boards silvered by damp. A county notice was stapled to a post beside a row of empty seedling trays. The paper snapped in the wind, then flattened, then snapped again. Mara lifted her phone and took pictures because Claire had told her to document everything. The screen shook in her hand. She photographed the roof vent, the broken door, the warning notice, the annex entrance, the seed return sign. Then she saw something taped to the inside of the annex window. Not taped, pressed between glass and wood. A yellowed paper tag, the kind used to mark flats. On it, in the same blue ink as the catalog, someone had written Mara E. No last name, no explanation. Just her first name and middle initial waiting in a building she had not known belonged to her. Empty and not quite done. She stood before the seed return sign until the cold found the seams of her jacket, and for the first time in 9 days she did not know whether she was looking at another ruin or the first shape of shelter. Mara found a rusted pair of bypass pruners in the Subaru's glove box and used them on the bindweed twisted through the gate latch. The vine had gone woody over winter. It snapped in dry strands, leaving dust on her fingers and a faint green smell where the living core still held. She worked slowly because haste made people careless around broken glass. At the nursery, she had once watched a seasonal worker step backward into a shattered cold frame pane and come up with blood running into his sock. That memory kept her eyes down now. She cleared the gate, lifted the loose chain, and opened it only wide enough for her body and duffel. The greenhouse did not welcome her. It made room with small complaints. The south door scraped gravel when she pulled it. A strip of metal, flashing, clicked overhead. Somewhere under the bench, a mouse shifted through old leaves. Mara stood just inside and took the building in the way she would have examined a sick plant, first structure, then water, then the hidden damage that did not show until touched. The central aisle ran the length of the glasshouse gravel packed hard under years of wind-blown soil. On both sides, cypress benches stood in long rows, some still level, some bowed like tired backs. Old plastic flats lay stacked under a collapsed square of shade cloth. A white mineral crust marked the legs of one bench where irrigation had leaked for years. Above her, steel ribs arched under patched glass, and the roof vent near the middle hung open, its crank handle missing. The annex door on the north side was swollen but not locked. Mara pushed it with her shoulder. It gave all at once, and the stale air inside came out smelling of paper, cold dust, and something faintly herbal like mint left too long in a drawer. She lifted her phone for light. The seed library room was smaller than she expected. 16 by 20 feet maybe. Beadboard walls, a concrete floor, a narrow window looking back into the greenhouse. Against the longest wall stood a bank of galvanized catalog drawers, the kind libraries once used for cards. Each drawer had a metal label holder. Some labels had faded to blank. Others still carried names written in careful ink. Beans, tomatoes, squash, onions, flowers, for cutting herbs, for kitchen windows. Mara touched the handle of the bean drawer, then stopped herself. Inventory could wait. The floor near the cabinet was dry, but ceiling stains spread above it like old maps. If the roof failed, paper would be the first thing lost. A county notice had been stapled to the inside of the annex door. Unsafe structure. Owner response required. Below that, in newer ink, someone had written demolition review pending. The words sat colder than the room. Mara photographed the notice and sent it to Claire Voss. Then she backed out, found a push broom with a cracked handle in the potting house, and began clearing one path down the center aisle. Glass made a thin, bright sound against gravel. She pushed it in careful arcs toward a piece of cardboard she found under a bench. Every few feet she stopped to pick out larger shards by hand, dropping them into an empty soil bag. Her fingers stiffened inside her gloves. The wind kept coming through the missing panes, lifting the hair at her neck and carrying with it the smell of dry grass from the fields beyond the fence. By mid-afternoon, a county truck pulled into the gravel outside. The man who stepped out wore a brown canvas jacket with a tear near one pocket and carried a clipboard under his arm. He did not look surprised to see her. He looked like a man who had expected bad judgment and was relieved to find only tired judgment. "You Mara Whitcomb?" "Yes." "Jonah Rias, County Maintenance." He nodded toward the warning placard. "You read that?" "I did, and came in anyway. I own it now, apparently." "That doesn't make the roof safer," Nomara said. "It makes the roof my problem." He studied her for a moment. He had a short beard, wind-reddened eyes, and the habit of looking at hinges, thresholds, gutters, and ground slope before looking at a person's face. Mara recognized the kind of attention. People who kept buildings standing had it. Jonah stepped only to the threshold and pointed with his clipboard. "Don't walk under that middle vent if the wind gets over 20. South door needs bracing. East corner is taking water. And don't touch the old heater unless someone checks the line. There's no power. Gas can still be stupid after everybody forgets it exists." Mara almost laughed, but the building made another clicking sound overhead, and the laugh left. He glanced at the bags of swept glass. Start with glass underfoot, then anything overhead. Cosmetics last. "I know." His eyes moved to her boots, her gloves the way she had stacked the shards with the sharp edges inward. "Looks like you do." From the bed of his truck, he took 2 rolls of contractor bags and set them just inside the gate. "County didn't give me permission to help you. I didn't ask." "I know." He tapped his placard with one finger. "But they'll move fast if they think you're camping in here or pretending this is safer than it is. Document what you do. Don't tear out anything historic looking. And if a beam shifts, leave." "I'm not camping," Mara said. The lie sat between them with her duffel bag visible on the potting house floor. Jonah did not call it by name. He looked toward the annex instead. Lottie kept that place cleaner than the courthouse records room, even near the end. You knew her. Everybody who needed a tomato start knew Lottie. He turned back to his truck. "I'll come by tomorrow if my route takes me this way." The truck left dust hanging low along the fence. Mara worked until her shoulders shook. She filled 3 bags with glass dead leaves, mouse-chewed plastic, and brittle plant tags gone blank with age. In the potting house, she found a deep porcelain sink stained brown under the tap, wall of hand tools arranged by size, and a little west window boarded from the inside with 2 pieces of plywood. A calendar from 2009 still hung beside the door, curled at the bottom. The month was October. Someone had circled seed return day in blue. On a nail near the sink hung a canvas apron. Mara knew it belonged to Lottie before she touched it. Not because she remembered her great-aunt clearly. She had only scraps, a woman with silver hair braided down her back, a paper cup of lemonade hands that smelled like crushed tomato leaves. But the apron carried the shape of a person who had done the same work for years. One pocket sagged deeper than the other. A line of darker fabric crossed the front where seed trays must have rested against it. The ties had been knotted and unknotted so often they had gone soft. Mara lifted it down. Dust rose, and under the dust came the smell of sun-warmed cloth and old potting mix. Inside the pocket she found a pencil stub, 2 blank plant labels, and a folded square of paper. Her breath caught, but it was only a supply list written in small slanted handwriting. Bleach, twine, vermiculite, coffee for Alma, hinges for north door. Not a secret, a Tuesday. Somehow that undid her more than a confession would have. Lottie had not lived in mystery every minute. She had remembered coffee. She had repaired hinges. She had written down ordinary things so the place could open the next morning. Mara folded the paper back along its creases and returned it to the pocket. Then she put the apron on over her denim jacket. It did not fit. The neck loop was too short, the waist too wide, and the canvas was cold against her ribs. She tied it anyway. Near evening, the wind rose. It came first as a low rush across the fields, then as a pressure against the broken south side. The greenhouse answered with rattles, ticks, and one sharp crack that made Mara freeze beside the potting bench. She looked up. The middle roof vent shuddered but held. A loose pane near the east end flexed in its frame. She gathered her duffel, the contractor bags, and the seed catalog from Claire's office, then moved into the potting house where the walls were wood and the roof sounded less fragile. No occupancy, the placard had said. She knew exactly what the words meant. She also knew the nearest motel wanted $68 before tax. Hard and brief. Water found holes overhead and tapped into a metal bucket near the door. Somewhere beyond the wall, a loose drawer in the seed cabinet slid open or shut with a soft metallic sigh. Mara turned her head toward the annex. The sound did not repeat. After the rain passed, moonlight found the broken glass roof and scattered itself across the potting house wall. Mara stood stiff from the floor and went to the nail by the sink. She took off Lottie's apron and hung it there carefully. For a second, the canvas shifted in the draft from the cracked window. It swayed once, then again, as if someone had just stepped out of it and left the work unfinished. By morning, the rain had left a dark seam under the annex door. Mara crouched beside it with a roll of paper towels and pressed one sheet to the concrete. It came away damp, but not soaked, which was better than she expected, and worse than she wanted. Water had entered from the north threshold, traveled along the slight slope of the floor, and stopped 2 feet short of the seed cabinet. She marked the wet edge with a pencil line on the concrete. At the nursery, water always told the truth first. Roots, walls, debts, marriages. They all failed faster when water found the place nobody checked. She opened the annex door wider and let the cold light in. The seed drawers waited along the wall, dull gray and streaked with age. Mara stood before them with a notebook from her glove box. Lottie's pencil stub, her phone camera, and a cheap pocket thermometer she had once used to check soil temperature in plug trays. She had bought it for $7 and kept it after the bank locked the nursery office as if one small tool could prove she had belonged to the work. She started with the top left drawer. Beans. The handle resisted, then slid out on gritty metal rails. Inside were rows of paper envelopes held upright by warped dividers. Most had gone yellow at the edges. A few had collapsed into soft dust. Mara did not touch the seeds yet. She photographed the drawer, wrote beans, top left dry. Odor, mouse droppings, absent envelopes fragile, and eased it closed. Tomatoes held more damage. One corner had stained brown from old moisture, and the paper there feathered under her breath. Squash smelled faintly of oil and dust. Onions was almost empty. Flowers for cutting. Contained brittle packets labeled with names she had not heard since childhood: Zinnia, Cosmos, Bachelor's Button, Calendula. Then she opened herbs for kitchen windows and stopped. Warmth touched her knuckles. It was slight, the kind of warmth a mug leaves on a table after being lifted away. In the cold annex, it felt impossible. Mara pulled her hand back and looked toward the ceiling. No light fixture, no hum, no outlet nearby. The breaker box in the potting house had been off its handle, stiff with years of disuse, and a paper tag from the utility company looped through it. She touched the drawer again. Warm. "Don't be stupid," she said aloud, because empty buildings made thoughts louder than they deserved. She placed the thermometer on the concrete floor. 41 degrees. She held it in the air near the cabinet. 43. She slid the probe into the open herb drawer without touching any packets and waited until the numbers stopped climbing. 56. Mara looked behind her, half expecting Jonah Reyes to appear in the doorway with a simple explanation and that clipboard face of his. But the yard beyond the annex was empty. Wind moved the brown grass flat and released it again. She checked the drawers above and below. Flowers was 44. Root crops, whose label had slipped sideways, was 43. The metal between them felt cold. Only herbs held that soft, impossible warmth. Mara took pictures of the thermometer from 3 angles. Then she walked to the potting house and checked the breaker box again. The main switch sat in the off position. No meter spun outside. No electric service line ran live to the annex as far as she could tell. She did not touch the old heater. Jonah's warning about forgotten gas had stayed with her. Back in the annex, she opened the herb drawer, 1 inch, then 2, then closed it. The warmth remained. She waited 10 minutes, notebook open on the cabinet top, and wrote the readings again. Aun a.m. Floor 41, room 43, Herbie drawer 56. At noon, after sweeping more glass from the central aisle and bracing the south door with a length of warped 2x4, she checked again. The room had risen to 50 in the sun. The herb drawer read 68. Mara stood very still. Heat meant source. Source meant path. There were only so many ways heat moved through an old greenhouse: sunlight, air, water, brick, metal, rot. She followed the cabinet wall with her palm not pressing hard. The beadboard behind the drawers felt cold until she reached the right side of the herb drawer. There, near the corner where the annex joined the greenhouse, the wall gave back the faintest stored warmth. On the other side stood the old germination bench. Mara went into the glasshouse. The south-facing panes above that bench were cracked but mostly intact, and the March sun poured through them in a hard white rectangle. Under the bench, half hidden by fallen shade cloth, was a low brick structure she had taken for a support pier. When she cleared away the cloth, she saw the bricks continued into the wall behind the seed cabinet. A heat chase. Not active, not mechanical, just old greenhouse sense. Dark brick gathered sun under glass-warmed air rose through a narrow channel, and somewhere behind the drawers that warmth had nowhere to go but into metal. Mara went back to the annex and tore a strip from the edge of a paper towel. She held it near the crack around the herb drawer. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the tissue leaned inward, trembling toward the drawer face as if the cabinet were taking a careful breath. The discovery should have satisfied her. A natural explanation was better than fear. But the drawer still bothered her, because warmth alone did not explain why that one had moved in the night, or why Lottie had left Mara's name pressed into the window. A car slowed outside the fence. Mara stepped into the greenhouse with the thermometer still in her hand. An elderly woman stood by the gate, one hand on the top rail and the other wrapped around a paper coffee cup. She wore a red knit hat pulled low over silver curls and a quilted coat patched at one elbow with blue fabric. "You Lottie's girl?" the woman called. Mara almost said no. The word came ready, shaped by habit. Instead, she walked to the gate. "I'm Mara. Alma Pike." The woman lifted the cup slightly. "I brought coffee, but if you already had some, I won't be offended. At my age, I mostly bring coffee, so people have to stand still long enough for me to look at them." Mara took the cup through the gate. It was warm enough to hurt her cold fingers. "Thank you." Alma's eyes moved past her to the greenhouse. "County finally let somebody in. I own it, sort of." That sounds like something a lawyer would say. Despite herself, Mara smiled. Alma did not. She looked toward the annex door and her face changed in a small inward way. "My mother brought me here in '58. We didn't have 2 nickels that winter. Lottie's father was still alive then. He had hotbeds going under glass when everybody else's ground was iron. Hotbeds, brick manure, heat in the older days, then sun channels later. Warm drawers, we called them. That wasn't the proper name." Alma nodded toward the seed library wall. "You'd put certain packets near warmth before planting. Not too much, just enough to wake them." Mara held the coffee with both hands. "Some things only wake when they are held warm long enough." The sentence came so clearly she turned toward the greenhouse as if someone had spoken it from inside, but it was only the line Lottie had written in the catalog or close to it, rearranged by memory and cold. "Did people return seeds here?" Mara asked. "If they could." Alma's mouth tightened. Some took and never returned. Lottie never shamed them, said hunger already kept its own books. Mara looked back at the annex. "Do you remember the herb drawer?" Alma's gaze sharpened. "Why?" "It's warm." The old woman's fingers tightened around the gate rail. Still, the word entered the air between them and stayed there. Mara unlocked the gate. Alma refused to step inside the greenhouse until Mara cleared a route, so they went slowly, Mara pointing out safe places, Alma moving with a cane she had kept hidden behind her coat. In the annex, Alma stood before the cabinet but did not touch it. This room was always cooler than the glasshouse, Alma said. Except right there. Lottie used to say the building had one living pocket. Mara opened herbs for kitchen windows. Warmth slipped into the room. Alma closed her eyes. "Well, I'll be. Was something kept here?" "Seeds," Alma said too quickly. Then softer names, promises. Hard to separate those some years. Mara waited, but Alma only shook her head. "I don't know what Lottie kept toward the end. She got private after the county program folded. Not unfriendly. Just careful." Alma turned toward the window. "If you take that drawer out, don't yank. Old cabinets punish impatience." After Alma left, Mara did not touch the drawer for nearly an hour. She cleaned instead. She swept the annex floor, dry-rolled towels along the threshold, and photographed the cabinet from front and side. She called Claire and left a message describing the warm drawer and asking whether she should stop before removing anything. Then she called Jonah's office number from the county website. It went to voicemail. She hung up without speaking. Finally, because no one else could decide for her. Mara knelt before the cabinet with a flathead screwdriver from Lottie's tool wall and a work glove folded over the drawer edge to protect the metal. The drawer came forward 6 inches, then caught. She leaned down with her phone light. On each side, a small spring stop held the rail. She had seen the same kind in old parts cabinets at the nursery. Press, both tabs lift slightly, keep level. If she tipped it, the envelopes inside would slide and tear. Her hands shook once. She waited until they stopped. The drawer released with a tired metallic sigh. Warm air touched her wrists. Behind the empty space where the drawer had been, she expected beadboard or brick. Instead, she saw a panel of wood set back 2 inches from the cabinet frame. It did not match the rest. Its paint was older, darker, and rubbed clean near the lower right corner. Mara reached in and pressed. Nothing. She looked closer. Dust had gathered everywhere except along one narrow vertical line. Not a hinge exactly. A seam. She slid the screwdriver tip into the line and eased. The panel gave with a soft pop and opened inward, no wider than her hand. The smell that came out was not rot. It was dry paper tin, and the faint, peppery scent of seeds kept long in darkness. Inside the shallow cavity sat one waxed paper envelope tied with cotton string. Mara did not pull it free at once. She photographed it where it lay. Then she set the phone down, reached in with both hands, and lifted the envelope as if it were a living cutting with roots too fine to see. On the front, in Lottie's blue handwriting, were the words, "Not for sale. For the families who come back." Mara sat back on her heels. No cash. No deed to clean her name. No proof that Tyler had lied. Just a paper envelope warmed by an old brick channel in a ruined greenhouse, carrying a sentence that seemed to know more about need than pride. Her first feeling was disappointment, and she was ashamed of it before it finished moving through her. Of course, some part of her had wanted rescue to arrive in a form the bank would recognize. A check. A buyer. A document sharp enough to cut blame away from her name. The envelope warmed her palms through the waxed paper. Outside, March light shifted behind a cloud, and the annex dimmed. The seed cabinet stood open, one drawer resting on the floor beside her knee, its rows of fragile packets waiting like quiet witnesses. Mara brought the envelope against her chest, not dramatically, not even on purpose. She only needed both hands around it for a moment, the way she had held the gas station coffee that morning, borrowing heat from whatever still had some to give. Cold light fell across the empty drawers. In the greenhouse beyond the wall, a loose pane clicked once and settled. Mara returned before sunrise with gloves, a screwdriver, a flashlight, and the steadier courage that came from having slept badly on purpose. She had spent the night in her car beside the feed store because she would not give the county an easy reason to call her reckless. Every hour or so she had woken and seen the greenhouse in her mind, the warm drawer resting on the floor, the false-backed cavity open behind it, the waxed envelope on the passenger seat beside her wrapped in a clean t-shirt. By 4:30, waiting had become harder than cold. Now the glass house stood dark against a paling sky. Frost silvered the gravel. Mara unlocked the gate, signed her name and the time on a page she had taped to the potting house wall, then photographed the annex before she crossed the threshold. If anything inside mattered, she would not let her need make the handling careless. The warm drawer cavity had cooled overnight, but not gone dead. When she held her palm near the open panel, a thin-stored warmth met her skin. She took pictures. First cabinet face removed, drawer false, panel envelope already documented the gap behind it. Then she reached in with 2 fingers and found the back of the cavity went deeper than she had thought. Tin touched her glove. She did not pull. She cleared more space, loosened a small wooden stop with the screwdriver, and eased the object forward inch by inch until a flat metal box slid into view. It was no larger than a biscuit tin. Its green paint scratched its lid, sealed with 2 bands of brittle cloth tape. Behind it lay a ledger wrapped in muslin, a long envelope stiff with official paper, and a folded letter bearing Mara's full name. Not Mara E. this time. Mara Elise Whitcomb. She sat back on the concrete and pressed both hands against her thighs. The letter could wait until the objects were safe. She made herself believe that. She laid a clean contractor bag on the cabinet top, then covered it with a piece of dry cardboard so no old paper would touch plastic. She photographed each item in place, then as removed. The ledger came out heavy and square, bound in brown cloth, worn pale at the corners. On its front, in black ink, Lottie had written, "Return Records, 1936-2009. The tin gave a dry whisper when Mara tilted it. Seeds, not coins. She knew the sound. Small life knocking lightly against metal. The long envelope held savings bonds. Mara saw the federal seal and closed it again before her mind could make a rescue out of numbers. She did not count them. Not yet. Money looked too much like an answer when a person was hungry. Last, she unfolded the letter. "Mara, if this has reached you, then I have trusted the law to do one decent errand." That sounded so much like the supply list, so dry and practical that Mara almost smiled. Then her throat tightened. "I am sorry I let distance harden between this branch of the family and yours. Your mother had reasons for leaving, and pride kept too many of us from asking what help looked like before help was needed. I watched from the edges. That was not enough. I cannot mend it now, but I can leave you work that once mended others. The greenhouse was never valuable the way men with clipboards measure value. It fed people who were too proud to say they were hungry. It gave seed to widows, renters, farmhands, young mothers, old men after layoffs, and children sent with jars because their parents could not bear to come themselves." Mara lowered the page and looked toward the glasshouse. Dawn had reached the cracked roof. Each broken pane held a dull line of light. She read on. "If you choose to keep this place, do not sell the old seed lines as curiosities. Do not let anyone turn need into a private collection. The ledger records trust, not debt. Some families returned more than they took. Some never could. Do not shame either kind. The metal tin contains what I could preserve. Test carefully. Assume loss. Celebrate only what wakes. The bonds are not yours in the way a purse is yours. They are meant to give the promise a floor under its feet. If the promise cannot be carried honestly, then use them to close the place with dignity." Mara stopped there. She folded the letter along its old creases and set it on the cardboard because her hands had begun to shake. A truck door closed outside. Jonah did not call through the building. He walked to the greenhouse entrance and waited where she could see him, one hand resting on the doorframe, but not crossing it. "Claire said you left me a message," he said. "I was already coming. I found records." His eyes went to the cardboard work surface, then away. He did not step closer. "Do you need the county to witness condition? I need someone to tell me how not to ruin it." "That's a better question." He came in slowly, placing his boots only where Mara had swept. When he reached the annex doorway, he took off his cap. The gesture was so quiet Mara almost missed it. "My grandmother used to talk about this place," he said. "Mostly when she was cutting beans for supper." Mara touched the ledger cover. "Her name might be in here." "Then I'll wait until you decide whether I have a right to see it." The restraint did more for Mara than eagerness would have. She opened the ledger. The first pages belonged to another hand older and sharper than Lottie's. Names, crops, years, returns. A column for notes. The entries were not dramatic. Mrs. Vale pole beans returned 2 jars. Harris, boy's sweet corn, father ill. Pike tomato starts paid with mending. Reyes, squash drought year, returned seed late but clean. Mara turned carefully, supporting each page from beneath. Decades passed under her fingers in ink. The handwriting changed after 1978. Lottie's blue appeared smaller and rounder. In the 1997 section, one name stopped her. Elise W., tomatoes and pole beans. Young child with her, send extra. Mara's mother had hated asking for anything. Mara remembered that as clearly as the baby food jars above the stove. Elise could stretch soup-mend cuffs, smile at landlords, and turn refusal into manners. But here was her need, written without judgment in blue ink. Young child with her. Send extra. Mara put one hand over her mouth. Jonah looked toward the greenhouse roof and gave her the privacy of not watching. The ledger did not say why Elise came. It did not have to. Mara had been 5. Old enough to remember her mother moving them twice in one winter, young enough not to understand why she flinched when a truck slowed outside the apartment. Lottie had known, or had guessed, or had simply seen a woman with a child and given seeds without requiring a confession. Mara read the line again until the letters blurred. That's why she chose me, she said. Jonah answered carefully. Maybe one reason. Mara wiped her face with the back of her glove and left a streak of dust across her cheek. I thought this was going to be another bill. Might still be, he said. The truth of it steadied her. Together, they made a temporary plan. Jonah would not remove anything from the property, but he knew a county clerk named Ruth Bell who had helped preserve records from an old rural schoolhouse before it became storage. He called her from the gravel drive where the signal was better. Mara heard only his side. No, not treasure, paper, seeds too, maybe. No, I'm not asking you to bend rules. I'm asking who keeps rules from stepping on something important. While he spoke, Mara opened the tin. Inside were envelopes packed tight, each wrapped in waxed paper and labeled in Lottie's hand: turkey craw, bean pike, yellow tomato, widow bell, dill, red calico, pole, Whitcomb, kitchen sage. Some packets felt empty, some held dust, some held the small hard shapes of seeds that might never wake and might still be worth protecting. At the bottom of the tin lay a narrow strip of paper. Some things only wake when they are held warm long enough. This time Mara did not mistake it for comfort. It was an instruction. Warmth was not sentiment. It was work, patience, timing, the difference between forcing life and making room for it. Jonah returned and leaned in from the doorway. Ruth can come tomorrow after lunch. She says photograph everything, keep it dry, don't separate papers from their order, and for heaven's sake, don't put old seed in a sunny window because it feels poetic. Despite the ache in her chest, Mara laughed once. I wouldn't. I figured, she doesn't know you. Mara looked around the annex water stain overhead, cold concrete below the open cabinet, the drawer on the floor, the ledger of hungry years lying on cardboard. Beyond the window, the greenhouse waited with its broken glass and rusted vents and benches still strong enough in places to hold trays. Clear her name. Instead, it had handed her a record of people who survived by returning what they could. Mara placed Lottie's letter on top of the ledger and covered both with clean muslin from the potting house shelf. Then she set the seed tin beside them, not hidden now, not exposed either, just protected from the draft. Sunlight reached through the cracked glass above the germination bench and touched the brick heat chase. A minute later, warmth began moving again behind the cabinet, quiet and practical, finding the drawer space where a promise had waited. The first thing Mara rebuilt was not beautiful. It was a path. Jonah brought orange cones from the county shop, a roll of caution tape he said had already been sun-faded before he got it, and a short list written by Ruth Bell after she inspected the papers. Keep records dry. Keep original order. No public handling yet. No seed testing without duplicate labels. Ruth writes like she's mad at moisture personally, Jonah said. She should be. Mara answered, taping plastic over the worst ceiling stain in the annex. They worked from danger inward. Broken glass went into contractor bags lined with cardboard. The loose south door was braced with 2 salvaged boards screwed across the lower frame. Jonah checked the old heater line and capped it off before Mara went near the potting bench. The roof vent over the middle aisle stayed open, but he wired it so it could not slam in the wind. Mara wanted to clean the seed drawers. She wanted to open the ledger again and trace every name. Instead, she wore safety glasses that pinched her nose and spent 2 days picking glass out of gravel with gloved fingers. Work had a way of refusing drama. A person could not be tragic while sorting shards by size. By the end of the week, the central aisle was passable. The annex threshold had a rubber sweep and a tarp covered the missing panes above the germination bench. Mara photographed each repair with a ruler and frame, because Claire said the county would trust documentation before hope. On the 4th afternoon, Jonah found her retying Lottie's apron over her denim jacket. You don't have to wear that to prove anything, he said. I'm not proving. What are you doing? Mara looked down at the apron pocket where the pencil stub rested against her hip. Trying not to lose the small things. He accepted that without comment and handed her a new box of dust masks. Cataloging began on a folding table borrowed from the church basement. Mara set it in the potting house under the boarded window where the light was indirect and the wind did not reach. Ruth Bell lent acid-free folders, cotton gloves, and a scanner that looked too clean for the room. Alma Pike arrived with coffee in a thermos and an old photograph sealed in a plastic sleeve. The photograph showed the greenhouse in summer. Every pane whole, doors open, children lined along the central aisle holding jars and paper packets. A younger Lottie stood near the seed cabinet with her braid over one shoulder, not smiling exactly, but looking as if she had counted everyone and found no one missing. "My mother took that," Alma said. She said Lottie could weigh seed by listening to it hit paper. Mara placed the photograph beside the ledger but did not let herself dwell there. Each item needed a number. Tin A, envelope A1, ledger page range, waxed packet condition, handwriting, crop, year, family name when present. The work slowed her thoughts to the size of labels. Turkey crawbean, 8 seeds intact, 2 cracked. Pike, yellow tomato powder, and fragments possible 3 whole seeds. Widow Beldill strong scent remaining dry. Whitcomb kitchen sage packet brittle contents uncertain. Alma identified names when Mara asked and only then. Harris boys had lived near the creek. Mrs. Vale washed laundry for half the town. The Bell family had lost a father in a grain elevator accident. Reyes squash, Alma remembered, came from a woman who would not take charity but would accept a trade against next year. When Mara reached Elise, Alma's hand stilled on her coffee cup. "You knew my mother came here," Mara said. "I knew a young woman came with a little girl who held a green scarf in both hands." Alma looked at the scarf at Mara's throat. "I didn't know what she was running from. Lottie didn't make stories out of people." Mara wrote the entry number carefully. Her hand did not shake this time. That evening, she taped a copy of the old photograph above the work table, not as decoration, as evidence that the room had once known order. The first seeds failed honestly. Mara almost respected them for it. She prepared the germination tests at the repaired end of the bench where the tarp kept out drafts and the old brick chase gave a mild afternoon warmth. She did not plant whole packets. That would have been hunger pretending to be faith. Instead, she chose 2 or 3 seeds from packets with enough material to risk set them on damp paper towels, folded them into labeled bags, and placed them in shallow trays away from direct sun. Ruth assisted on duplicate labels. Mara made 3 for each trial, 1 in the tray, 1 in the notebook, 1 on a master chart taped to the wall. The tomato fragments molded by day 3. 1 bean split and showed nothing but a hollow center. The dill smelled alive but stayed still. Mara recorded each failure because pretending would only betray the work later. On day 5, a turkey craw bean swelled. Mara saw it in the morning while the potting house sink dripped into a bucket. The seed coat had wrinkled, then opened at one end. A pale root tip pressed out no longer than the line of a comma. She did not cheer. The sound would have been too large for the room. She sat on the overturned bucket and looked at it until her eyes burned. Then she wrote, A1, germination visible day, 5:7:42 a.m. root tip present. Jonah arrived while she was still holding the notebook. "Bad news or good?" he asked. Mara turned the tray so he could see. He leaned close but did not touch the bag. "That's small." "It's supposed to be." He nodded, and the seriousness of his nod saved her from having to explain why something so small could change the weight of the building. By the end of April, 3 beans had rooted, 1 dill trial showed green, and every tomato remained stubborn. Mara learned to say failed without flinching. Failed did not mean worthless. It meant the truth had arrived early enough to guide the next attempt. At night, when Tyler sent another message about creditors, she listened to only the first 2 seconds, then deleted it. She had begun to understand that clearing her name might not come as a public correction. It might come as a life built so carefully that his story could no longer hold her. The county hearing was held in a room with beige walls, folding chairs, and a clock that clicked louder than anyone's pen. Mara wore the gray thermal shirt without the apron. Lottie's ledger lay in a protective box at her feet. Claire Voss sat beside her with a yellow legal pad. Jonah stood at the back because he was county maintenance and did not want anyone mistaking his presence for permission. The storage contractor spoke first. He was polite, clean-shaven, and practical. The lot was unsafe. The structure had no certified use. The county needed storage overflow. He was prepared to clear the property at his own expense and purchase the parcel once title issues were resolved. He did not sound cruel. That made him harder to hate and easier to answer. When it was Mara's turn, she carried the protective box to the table. She did not open the ledger fully. Ruth had prepared 3 copied pages with private details covered. Mara placed them before the board seed records from 1936, 1958, and 1997. Names partially hidden. Crops visible. Returns marked when they happened. This building was not abandoned because it had no purpose, Mara said. Her voice came out rough, so she slowed it. It was abandoned because the people who remembered its purpose got old. A board member asked whether she had funds for repairs. Not enough for everything, Mara said. Enough to begin safely. I have an attorney helping with the estate. I have a preservation clerk advising on the records. I have germination tests showing at least some seed lines may still be viable. The contractor leaned toward his microphone. With respect, old beans don't solve liability. No, Mara said. Temporary bracing glass removal, water control insurance, and inspections solve liability. I'm doing those in order. Jonah looked down at his boots, but she saw one corner of his mouth move. Mara did not tell them about Elise's name. She did not tell them about Lottie's exact letter. She did not hold up hunger like a sign. She only showed enough truth to prove the place had carried public value once and could carry it again if given time. The board did not grant her everything. They gave her 60 days, a required inspection schedule, and a warning that sentiment would not stop demolition if the structure worsened. Outside in the parking lot, Mara sat on the curb with the records box beside her. Claire stood over her, blocking the wind. You did well. I got 60 days. That is what well looks like in a county room. Jonah came out last. He held a folded paper in one hand. Inspection checklist, he said. Official copy. Mara took it. The list was long. Roof stabilization, door repair, water intrusion, proof of liability coverage, secured records storage, no public access. Then she looked at the first item and saw not a verdict but the next physical task. South door first, she said. Jonah nodded. South door first. That evening, Mara returned to the greenhouse and set the checklist on Lottie's potting bench. The rooted bean in its labeled tray had lifted itself a fraction higher, pale stem bending toward the repaired glass as if the room had already voted to continue. The hail came on a Thursday in May, hard as thrown gravel and brief enough to feel personal. Mara was in the annex labeling dill trials when the first stones hit the glasshouse roof. The sound began as tapping, then turned into 1,000 sharp impacts at once. She ran only as far as the potting house doorway and stopped herself. Running under old glass was how panic made injuries. The tarp over the germination bench sagged under ice. One patched pane shattered near the south door. Water blew sideways through the opening and spattered the rooted beans. When the storm passed, the greenhouse looked defeated in a new way. The repairs she had made seemed childish against the weather. The county checklist taped to the potting bench had gone soft at the corners. Mara stood in the aisle with hail melting around her boots and thought of calling Claire to ask how to surrender properly. Then Alma arrived with towels. Behind her came Deacon Harris with 2 ladders in the back of a pickup, the FFA students with work gloves, Ruth Bell with plastic document bins, and Jonah carrying a stack of salvaged panes from a schoolhouse window replacement the county had never thrown away. No one gave a speech. That saved Mara. Alma took the wet labels and set them flat to dry. Ruth moved the ledger box into the safest corner of the potting house. The students swept hail and glass into separate piles because Mara showed them how. Jonah and Deacon measured the south openings twice before cutting temporary plywood. By sunset, the greenhouse was uglier than it had been that morning, but drier. Mara stood beside the repaired bench, too tired to thank anyone correctly. Alma pressed a mug into her hand. Don't make gratitude fancy, she said. Just be here tomorrow. Mara looked at the rows of small trays, some lost, some spared. I can do that. The second note waited in Lottie's propagation notebook, not hidden well, only hidden patiently. Mara found it in June while checking old instructions for damping off prevention. The notebook was full of practical sentences. Sterilize flats. Do not overwater tomatoes. Thin with scissors, not fingers. On the last page, tucked behind a seed order form, was an envelope addressed to whoever keeps the records honest. Inside were not more bonds. Mara was relieved before she understood why. The note explained what the long envelope was for. Lottie had purchased small savings bonds over many years with money from plant sales, refunded deposits, and gifts people insisted she take after harvest. The bonds were to be placed in a community trust if the greenhouse could legally reopen, not in Mara's pocket, not in the county's general fund, not in a private buyer's climate-controlled display case. Claire read the note twice at the folding table. She anticipated the problem, Claire said. Which problem? That people trust money less once they can see it. Mara looked toward the old seed cabinet. The warm drawer had been reinstalled, but left empty, its false back repaired. So the heat chase still worked. Can it be done? A modest nonprofit seed library, yes. Slowly. With boring paperwork. Good, Mara said. Boring sounds stable. Claire smiled without showing teeth. That may be the first time anyone has said that in my office work. They filed papers in stages. Mara learned words that felt too large for the greenhouse articles of incorporation, charitable purpose liability policy board minutes. Ruth agreed to serve as records advisor. Alma refused any title but accepted founding witness when Mara wrote it on a form. Jonah would not join the board while employed by the county, but he built a locked records shelf on his own time and pretended it had taken less work than it had. The bonds, once counted and verified, became enough to give the promise a floor insurance basic repairs seed storage, a small legal reserve, and later, if the board approved, a caretaker stipend that would not embarrass anyone by pretending to be generous. Mara slept less in the car. By July, Claire had found a lawful way for her to use the old office corner as temporary caretaker space once the inspection cleared. The first night Mara slept there, rain tapped the repaired panes above her, and no water came in. Summer made the greenhouse smell alive again. Not lush, not easy. The repaired sink ran brown for the first minute, then clear. The benches held flats instead of broken plastic. A thermometer hung where Mara could see it from the aisle. The beans climbed strings tied to a temporary frame, their leaves rough and bright. Dill feathered up in soft green threads. The tomatoes remained the heartbreak of the season until one late trial, warmed near the brick chase but kept out of direct sun, sent up a crooked stem as pale as a question. Jonah saw it before Mara told him. That one knew, he asked, leaning over the bench with his hands behind his back. Pike yellow tomato, trial 5. Alma, no. She'll pretend not to cry. She's earned that right. He had come to build the public checkout cabinet from the old card drawers that could not safely hold archival seed anymore. He sanded the metal labels clean and cut new wooden dividers, each slot wide enough for modern packets. Mara painted small categories on cream cards: beans, herbs, flowers, kitchen garden, return envelopes. While fitting a drawer stop, Jonah asked if he could see one copied ledger page. Mara brought him the Reyes entry. Ruth had prepared private notes covered except the crop and return mark. He read it standing beside the bench, thumb resting on the paper edge. My grandmother never talked like she needed help, he said. Maybe this place let her call it something else. Trade against next year, he read. Mara waited. After a while, Jonah handed the page back. Put squash on the first public list, if we can get seed. I have cousins who still grow too much of everything. We'll ask properly. The checkout cabinet took 3 weekends. The FFA students helped sand the rough corners. Deacon Harris repaired the north door. Alma sat in a lawn chair near the entrance and corrected everyone who called the restored sign charming. It is not charming, she said. It is accurate. So Mara painted the words clean and plain. Seeds returned here. The private buyer sent one more offer in August. It came by email through Claire with enough money attached to make Mara sit down before she finished reading. The buyer wanted the seed cabinet, the ledger, if legally transferable. The greenhouse sign and naming rights for a heritage seed experience planned 3 counties away. Mara read the message twice. Then she walked the length of the greenhouse. Heat gathered under the repaired south glass. The brick chase warmed slowly beside her. The empty, warm drawer waited in the cabinet, no longer hiding the promise, but still shaped by it. On the bench, the turkey craw beans had begun to set pods. The dill had gone to flower. The late tomato leaned toward light with stubborn, ridiculous dignity. Mara thought of $142 in a cup holder, of frost inside the windshield, of Tyler's voice saying internal mismanagement, of how easily money could disguise itself as proof that she had survived. She did not answer from that hunger. At the potting house table she wrote, "No thank you. The records and seed lines will remain with the Whitcomb Seed Annex for public use under the trust." Claire filed the nonprofit papers the next week. Ruth cataloged the ledger for restricted access. Alma brought 2 jars of returned bean seed from families who had heard the greenhouse was breathing again. Jonah installed the checkout cabinet beside the annex door and set the first blank ledger beneath a sign Mara had written in Lottie's old style. "Take what you can tend, return what you can spare." On the day the inspection cleared, limited public hours. Mara stood alone in the glass house after everyone left. She tied Lottie's apron over her shirt and put her mother's green scarf on the clean hook beside it. For the first time, neither object looked abandoned. By late October, the greenhouse held noon like a blessing it had learned to earn. Sunlight came through repaired glass in long, clean panels. Not every pane matched. Some were older, wavier salvaged from school windows and church basements. Some were new and plain. Together they made a roof that kept weather out and let light in, which was more than Mara had once believed a roof could promise. The central aisle was still gravel, but now it was raked smooth. The cypress benches had been sanded, braced, and sealed where they could be saved. The broken ones had become shelves, labels, and a low work table for children. The potting house sink worked if the handle was lifted slowly. The old office corner held a narrow bed, a lamp, and a stack of folded clothes that no longer lived in a duffel bag. Mara opened the seed library at 10 without a ceremony. She had refused a ribbon. Alma had approved. People who needed seeds should not have to walk through applause to get them. The first visitor was a little girl in purple sneakers, sent ahead of her grandmother to inspect the place. She stopped at the threshold and looked up at the roof. "Is it old?" she asked. "Yes," Mara said. "Is it fixed? Enough to be useful?" The girl considered that and accepted it. Neighbors came in slowly after that. Some signed the new ledger with careful handwriting. Some touched the old cabinet before opening a drawer. Some brought envelopes already labeled from their own gardens: okra, marigold, black-eyed pea, winter squash. Jonah's cousin arrived with squash seed in a coffee tin and a note that said, "Trade against next year," because some phrases deserved to remain practical. Alma stood by the restored photograph wall and watched people find names they recognized on the copied public pages. The original ledger was safe in its locked shelf, brought out only with Ruth present. But Mara had prepared excerpts that protected private details while proving the promise had been real. Near noon, Jonah carried in the last piece of the checkout cabinet a narrow brass label for the empty warm drawer. He had engraved it himself, "Living Pocket." Mara ran her thumb over the letters. "You named it." "No," he said. "Alma did. I just made it harder to misplace." They installed it together. The drawer slid cleanly now, its rails repaired, its false back fixed in place, but no longer secret. Warmth still gathered there when sun touched the brick chase. Mara used it for demonstration packets, not storage beans sealed in clear envelopes, a thermometer, and a note explaining passive heat patience and why old seeds should be tested carefully instead of rushed. In the afternoon, Ruth brought Mara one final copy from Lottie's personal papers. It was not part of the public display. It was a receipt book page folded around a photograph of Elise Whitcomb at 26 Mara on her hip, both of them squinting in greenhouse light. Behind the photograph, Lottie had written, "Sent check again. She will not ask. Child needs boots before winter." Mara read it in the potting house with the door half closed. For a few minutes, she was 5 years old again, holding the green scarf while her mother chose seeds with the tense politeness of someone trying not to break. Then she was 28, standing in a room that smelled of damp soil and clean wood, holding proof, not of a grand rescue, but of small mercies repeated until they became a life. Lottie had not saved them, not completely. No one person had, but she had noticed. Mara folded the copy and placed it in the inside pocket of the denim jacket she still wore on cool mornings. She did not put it on display. Some truths became stronger when they were not asked to perform. The bonds had done their quiet work. Insurance paid. Roof stabilized. Legal reserve established. A modest caretaker stipend approved by the board, small enough to require other work someday, large enough that Mara no longer counted quarters before coffee. Tyler's messages had stopped after Claire sent him a formal letter about the nursery paperwork Mara had saved. There was no public downfall, no dramatic confession. Only a correction entered where it mattered, a silence Mara no longer filled with fear. Near closing, the little girl in purple sneakers returned to the checkout cabinet. Her grandmother stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder. "Beans," the girl said. Mara opened the drawer and showed her the packets. "These need sun poles and someone who remembers to water even when the leaves look fine." "I can remember. Then write your name here." The girl printed slowly in the new ledger. Mara waited without helping. Names mattered. Hunger often hid behind pride, but hope she was learning liked to be written plainly. When the packet was ready, the girl took it in both hands as if carrying water. After everyone left, Mara swept the aisle, checked the sink, lowered the vent, and made notes for the next morning. Pike yellow tomato save seeds separately, dill heads drying. Ask Alma about winter hours. The ordinary list steadied her. Bleach, twine, vermiculite, coffee for Alma, hinges for north door. A Tuesday could be a form of grace if someone kept it. Before locking up, she stood in the annex before the old seed cabinet. The warm drawer rested at waist-height brass label catching the last gold of the day. She opened it and felt the stored sun rise against her hands. Some things only wake when they are held warm long enough. Mara said the sentence softly, not as a lesson for anyone else, but as a fact the building had proven board by board, seed by seed, name by name. Warmth was not rescue arriving all at once. It was a hand on a gate latch, a copied ledger page, a salvaged pane, a small root tip recorded honestly, a refusal sent without bitterness, a girl carrying beans home. She closed the drawer gently. In the glass house, October, sunlight filled the repaired roof and settled on the benches where green starts waited for their turn. Beyond the open door, the road lay quiet, the fields brown and patient under the afternoon sky. Mara watched the little girl walk away with the bean packet held carefully in both hands, and the old greenhouse no longer empty kept its warmth behind her.